Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and as always, we've got a great show for you this evening. We're going to start things out here in just a moment or two with another great discussion on Coach's Corner. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be joined also once again by a very special guest. He was on a little earlier this year, Terry Koehler, the Chairman and Director of Innovation for Edison Golf. He's going to be joining me, and we're going to pick up our conversation from a few months ago and talk a little bit about the design and sort of the thought process, if you will, and behind their ever-popular wedges. So we're going to talk to Terry a little bit later on in the show. But let me remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday evening on blogtalkradio.com as our main site, and we're here from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Central, or 7 to 9 for those of you on the East Coast. And always excited to be here live on the program. And for those of you that maybe don't get the chance to always tune in, you can just go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, and you scroll down to the on-demand section, and you'll find all of the previously aired shows, including tonight's will be there after the broadcast. You can listen to the recorded version there and pick up any that you may have missed. So, again, thanks for those of you that are tuning in live tonight. And I thought, based on tonight's discussion, it couldn't have happened at a better time that I would have my very special guest and good friend on the Coach's Corner panel, because he specializes in the short game particularly. Obviously, he does all aspects of the game, but has really dialed in, as it were, on the short game. So I'm going to introduce my good friend, Clint Wright. He's a 30-plus year member of the PGA and a partner at TGM Golf. And they're, of course, a big proponent, as I've mentioned, of the R3 approach. Consider him to be among the best covering the short game, and as always, of course, a favorite guest here on Coach's Corner panel. And he's become a good friend of mine over the last several years. So please welcome my very special guest on Coach's Corner, Clint Wright. Clint, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Ted. Glad to be here. I appreciate all the nice compliments.
Well, hey, I was thinking back earlier, when I was, when I was preparing for the show, and I remember we used to joke around in the beginning how you were kind of at the back of the bus.
Right.
And you've slowly creeped up, and now you're sitting right behind the driver's seat here on Coach's Corner. So,
I've been working real hard, Ted. I've been working real hard.
Well, I appreciate it. So I thought, as I said in the intro, we have a lot of different things we've talked about on the game, and I know that the short game is an area that you really have been very passionate about dialing in. And so I've got a few questions that were sent to me that people have, and some of them are more general, and some of them get a little bit more in depth. But I just want to, just sort of do a little bit of an introduction here. And I think really the short game is one of, if not, can be the most fun area of the game to practice. And, why is this? Well, it changes to the short game have a very quick impact on the rest of your game. Obviously, it's nice to hit some long tee shots, but there's a lot of components to the short game. And if you learn to master them a little bit better, you're going to really save some strokes and help to lower your handicap. And that's what we're hoping to do a little bit tonight. So I want to start off with a might seem like a very obvious question, Clint, but what really covered? Just explain what is in the short game. What is included, or what do we consider part of the short game, just sort of the various components?
Well, a lot of people have different definitions to it. I've kind of morphed into or developed beyond what I would call the short game is more talking about your third shot. Everybody up here gets tired of me talking about you got to get to your third shot. You got to get to the third shot. Because if you get your third shot on the green in 2-putt, you can shoot 90. I mean, so if you're trying to make some progress, that's the way to look at it. So I've always considered kind of old school, the short game is anything inside 100 yards to the hole. You know, wedges, chipping, pitching, bunker play. Obviously, putting would be considered part of the short game, although many of us would talk about it as being a separate game altogether.
Right.
So in that general thing, kind of the where right now I've been working on some ideas about how you close the gap. You know, you got a 400-yard hole. You got your gap's 400 yards long, so we want the next shot's just to reduce the gap. So when we get up to where we think we can reduce the gap close to the hole, then we might want to think that as being part of our short game or scoring zone, red zone, scoring game, whatever you want to call it. But what it really comes down to is you're in an area that you can close the gap to the hole as close as you can and hopefully utilize a 1-putt or at least a 2-putt to keep your score down. So broad definition of short game, but on the other hand, it's the scoring shot. Inside 100 yards, I guess, would be anything you hit from that range or closer, we can include in that scoring game or short game area.
Yeah, and you touched on really the main points, obviously putting, chipping, and pitching,
right.
With that inside that 100 yards, and obviously bunker play and things like that, but
right.
sort of fall into that for the most part. Certainly greenside bunkers, let me clarify, because obviously fairway bunkers
sure.
Sometimes are going to be a lot further, but I think
right.
folks understand. The reason why I wanted you to sort of clarify that is because a lot of people spend, I think, unfortunately, more time overall ball striking and not really dialing into some of those areas. So this might sound like a very generic question that I'm about to ask you, but I'm going to frame it in such a way that I think you'll be able to cover a lot of ground with this. So I've had a number of people over the years ask this question, and obviously it depends on the individual. But a lot of the similar question is, why is my short game so bad? And, obviously there could be 1,000 reasons, but typically based on your experience, when you've watched and worked with a number of people over the years that you have, what are some of the symptoms of a bad short game that you come across very frequently? And typically, what is it they're doing or not doing that's hampering or not allowing them to improve that area of their game?
Well, you can call it a symptom. I think you might want to consider, I like to call it a behavior. What's your behavior when you go to your practice area, whether it be the driving range, if you want to call it that, or the short game area? A lot of golf courses today have been trying to develop a short game area where a person can go chip and putt and pitch and bunkers and stuff, but many golf courses don't. So if you look at what I think is the biggest problem, the behavior of most players is to want to go and hit downrange shots. They want to go to the range and they want to hit those home runs, So the behavior that you see with their, quote, practice time is that they don't spend any time proportionately working on shots from 100 yards in. So I see it as behavior, that when the player goes out there, how am I going to behave in this practice area? Am I just going to hit drivers and 7-irons or 3-woods? Or am I going to go over here and spend a little time chipping and putting and pitching? So that's the behavior and how they utilize their time. Beyond that, what I see, let's even take the person that said, okay, I'm not going to hit range balls today. I'm going to pitch. And what you see a lot is that they don't work on distance control very well. Now, First of all, we're going to assume that they're making contact, all right? If they're not making contact with the ball, then what you most of the time see is a loss of the angle at impact. They flip the club up and trying to lift it up in the air. So that's generally the thing you see the most fault in, is trying to flip it up in the air. So if you can get that corrected and the left hand or the lead hand is in front of the ball at impact, then it comes down, you've got solid and maybe consistent contact. So it would behoove you to work and develop distance control. You get in 25, 30 yards off the green, it's hard to hit it really that much offline. You're just not making that big a swing. All right, so distance control is paramount, that you can say, okay, I need to land this ball 30 yards and let it roll up to the green. Well, you kind of need to know what you need to do to hit it 30 yards. It really comes back down to one of the things we've talked about many times as far as speed control on the greens. Get some data on benchmark strokes that day. Figure out what you got to do to make a ball go that far. And most people today are carrying at least 3 wedges, maybe 2, but most time it's a pitching wedge, a gap wedge, and a sand wedge. And you can develop distance control with each one of those to get a pretty wide variety of shot patterns that you can call on, depending on the situations you're faced with. So behavioral-wise, they don't practice a lot in that area. But when they do, I don't see them working different type of shots. They just go out and hit pitch shots. And the one that gets me is that, you're going, and I trick people into making a point here. So let's just hit it to that flag there on the practice green. And they'll hit balls to that flag. And I said, you are never going to have that shot to that flag. The question you should have asked me is how far that flag is. How far is the flag away? And then you can figure out what you got to do. So I try to get people to focus their attention on making certain length swings with their wedges. We've also, swing by the clock. I like knee high, waist high, shoulder high, to find out how the ball reacts and responds when you do those certain things. The most wasted behavior is standing there and hitting at a flag on the practice range and not knowing anything about how far that flag is away. So it comes down to proper behavior and proper purpose when they go there. So those are the biggest things. That was a little long-winded, but that's what I see.
No, that's a great answer, Clint. Thank you for that. Just to sort of jump on that just a little bit more, what I often will do, because again, you're right. You'll see people hitting to, they'll see a short flag, and let's say for argument's sake, it may be, 100 or slightly over 100 yards away. And, they're just hitting to the flag shot after shot, and, or they'll point to another flag and maybe try to do that as well. And what I'll often do is, if you're going to park yourself in front of that 100-yard flag, here's a good way to work on that is, first off, again, determine how far that flag is. So let's say it's 100 to keep it simple. So, you're going to hit a few shots. Obviously, you want to say, okay, what have I got to do to get it to that 100 yards? And then without having to move anywhere, figure out roughly halfway between where you are and where that flag is. So now you're looking at a 50-yard shot, and then break it down maybe 2 or 3 times to a 30, or 75-yard, whatever it is. Technology now with rangefinders and that, you can pretty much zero in exactly. And yeah, it's not going to be hitting to a green, but at least you're getting that feel. So if you're going to sit yourself, figuratively speaking, in front of a flag, break that flag down in 3 or 4 different options. So whatever the long distance is 100, break it down to 75. What shot do I need to hit at 75 and 50 and so on, so that you have an understanding. Obviously, you should move to a short game area, but as you said, some of them don't, so you have to be creative. So I think that's another way to, if you're going to do something like that, put some thought into it and sort of create some scenarios and some options for you to focus on. Because even though it's not going to a green at that 50-yard shot, you know how far you're hitting it. So, and what type of shot is needed to take. So that's just some extra things that I like to try to get to. And if I see somebody practicing on the range, even if I'm not working with them, I'll even suggest that to them and get them to break that habit of what you talked about, where they're just hitting to that flag all the time and thinking, okay, I'm working on my short game, when they're really not working on a lot of aspects, especially with the wedge play. But I just wanted to add that in there as just an option for people I've found to be very successful. So this brings me to sort of the second part of that same question is how much or often should I practice my short game if I truly want to get better? And again, there's a lot of variables here, but let's take a sort of a generic approach to this. If somebody's playing once a week, maybe twice a week, and wants to seriously improve their game, they're making a commitment, what's a good way to make good use of that time? We understand the types of shots they should be working on, but how much time should they actually be dedicating to see some noticeable results?
Well, I mean that's pretty much an open-ended answer. I mean, if depends on how much time they have. I mean, if they're playing twice a week, I mean that's probably what average of what a player may do, or once a week. I look at it if I have time to practice. Okay. And I'm going to go and dedicate an hour of practice, or an hour and a half, however much time I have. I'm going to try to remember, like last week I played twice. I drove it okay. I hit a few fairways, may have gotten rough a few times. I hit it okay. I hit my irons pretty good. I hit 10, 11 greens. That's okay. And try to, again, what we've always talked about, identify where you were struggling and spend the majority of my lesson or my practice time that day working on where I may have struggled last week when I was playing. And so, if you go out there and play today and you don't hit but one fairway, you might want to spend more of your time working on your driving that particular session. So I like the idea of having some sense of how you played the time before and where were the holes in your proficiency. And if my holes in my proficiency, well, I really didn't putt very well, then I'm going to spend that practice session working on my putting, or at least the majority of it. Okay, and then if I putted okay, but I had a little bunker trouble, I'm not going to hit it now hitting bunkers, so I'm not going to spend a dramatic amount of time. I'm going to try to kind of get a feel for it, see what I want to do, but then go on and practice some other stuff. But when I'm maybe hitting 10 or 11 greens around, I'm not going to spend, or 12, I'm not going to spend a lot of time hitting full shots. I want to go to, well, I didn't get it up and down but once. Well, why didn't you get it up and down? Well, my chipping, my proximity was 15 feet. Well, I need to work on my chipping a little bit. So I spend the majority of my time there. So the answer to the question is I'm going to spend the majority of my time where I was having difficulty. If it's putting good, go ahead. That's right.
Yeah, what I was just gonna say is really the number one thing is to identify where the problems are, where the difficulties, where you're struggling first, and then then appropriately spend the amount of time, whatever it ends up being, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, what have you, focusing on those key areas. What I typically like to do, and I'll give two quick scenarios. If somebody's playing once a week and if somebody's playing twice a week. If somebody's playing once a week, I prefer them because they're going to warm up. Most people, unless they're not thinking straight, are going to warm up a little bit before they play that day. So get out there, warm up, find out what game you've got that day. How you're slicing the ball, are you hooking the ball? What is it you're doing? Are you a little bit inconsistent? Go out and play that round. Take note and be conscious of, as you said, what's going on in that another day based on what they've discovered in that round, and work on those areas so that when they go out next week and they warm up, they've already had some thought process going into it. They know some of the weak areas that they've had. If they're playing 2 rounds a day, 2 rounds a week, depending on how they're situated, but usually if it's early in the week and then maybe one on the weekend, I like to get them to do a practice in between those, again, for the same reason. Warm up on the first day that you're playing. Get out there and see how you are, what problems you're having on that first day. Then go out and practice those, and then see how that has worked on the second round that you're playing later in the week. And then sort of culminate everything that's gone over that week, and then you carry it on to the next week. But I like to do that in between, as opposed to just practicing ahead of time on every scenario and then just going out and playing a couple of rounds. So I like to sort of allow them an opportunity to play, see where the problems are, get out there, work on that. When they're playing again, see how it helps or not helps, and then reassess for the following week and do the same thing. So sort of repeat and rinse, if you will. And I think it gives you an idea of how the steps that you're taking and the things that you're working on, how it's sticking around. And that's why I like to get people to do it after they've played, not immediately after, but after they've played, so they have a better understanding of what the problem areas are, and then they can focus on those when they do their practice session. So that's just my thought. You may or may not agree with that, but that's what I have found to be most successful for students that I've worked with. And if you want to add to that, or you want to
I
disagree?
really don't have a whole lot to. No, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think that's an approach that's data driven, and then you just have to decide what you're going to do with the data. I mean, that's I tend to like to think, well, today I'm just going to take what I got and do the best I can with it, and then make some kind of analysis to map out a plan to get better at it if I really want to. There's no question about that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Now, this question here, again, there's a number of things that you can do. And the reason why I pulled this question out of some of the questions that I received is, you and I and many others that may be tuning into the show are very fortunate. We're down here in the South. We can play a lot of golf even through the winter months. We have the climate. It's conducive weather most of the time, certainly a few, bad days here and there, but we can pretty much play a lot of golf. We're getting a lot of people here in the upcoming months. We still got another maybe couple of months left up in the Northeast and even Northwest, where they're going to start getting into some really cold climates, and they're not going to be able to get out and play. So one of the options is, if you don't have access to some sort of an indoor facility to work on your game, to do at home. Have you got some tips that maybe you could give for golfers that maybe are looking at, I hate to use the word hibernating for the winter months, but don't have access maybe to some of the same golf that we have, that they could, maybe things that they could be doing at home to keep themselves, in pretty good shape, tuned up in that, so that when they get back out in the course, when things are, warming up again, they're prepared and they're not sort of sitting like a lame duck for 3 or 4 months.
Well, I think that there's some obvious answers to that. One is that you could, entertain a fitness program, and it's the not the newest craze. We've all known that for years, but a lot of clubs today have fitness programs, either through the local YMCA or a gym somewhere that they're affiliated with. You might want to check with their local pro or club manager or whatever level of their club's at. And if they don't have an affiliated program, they should reach out and see if they can't develop one for their members or the people that play there. If not, just reach out to a gym or personal trainer that would give you, a routine. I'm not the person that, to tell you to do these many setups and stretches and whatever, but there are plenty of people that's available today online. I mean, there's so much information on how to do things correctly to stay as fit as you can through the winter and keep your body stretched, and maintain what you have. But one of the things I think, if you look at, we've always talked about it for years, is that if I'm going to do something in my house to hopefully get me to next season with either better or maybe a different attitude about it, I'm going to work on my putting. Because if I can improve my putting stroke and my ability to hit it on line, then I'm going to be able to stand out there 15, 20 yards off the green and not think I've got to hit it dead to the hole to get it up and down. So it frees me up a little bit in chipping. Now, most of us don't have the ability to chip in our house, but putting, I can do that. And so if I improve my ability to roll the ball on line and, improve my stroke, if you'd like to say that, it frees up my chipping to not have to be so good, which in reality makes it better because I'm not stressing about it and getting tight and trying to jam it up there. So I can get better simply because the next shot, the putting stroke, I have more feel for, if you want to say more confidence in it, more belief that I can make the putt. And one of the things I have found that mimics a lot of green speeds is, I know you know this stuff, I don't know what they call it, but it's this little material that you put under a throw rug that holds it in place. That really has the proper speed. I got one in my office. And you can go to Walmart, any place, that has stuff like that, and buy you a piece, cut you a piece out, maybe 4 or 5 feet long, 3 feet on it. And what I did on mine was I drew a 4 1/4 inch hole, on one end, and I drew a line on it down the middle, okay, to where I had a line that I could put it on, and get visually better at that. And that's something you can do all the time, not just in the winter.
Right.
And I found it to be quite productive with people to say, okay, I see the line now better. I know where I'm looking for the line, and I can keep the ball on it. So that just gives me a more relaxed feel when I'm trying to make that 4-footer or 3-footer. That now I feel good about that I don't have to chip it 2 feet to get it up and down. And fortunately, I think many times you find we don't think you have to chip it 2 feet. You do, because you're more relaxed taking the ball in there. So fitness program is obvious to the question, but I think one is not, is improve your putting. See the line better. Try to get your stroke down to where you can put it on the line you picked, and then continue to develop that. And, 10 minutes every now and then, it's amazing how much more productive you can be with your intermediate putting for sure if you do that through the winter. I highly encourage people to do that.
Yeah, some great points. And just to add to that, I think, if you're in a situation, some people may have access, as you said, to a facility where they can get in and practice indoors. Up in Buffalo, as an example, they have a dome where you can go in, at all times of the season and work on that. But a lot of folks may not have access. So I'm always a firm believer, work on what you can. So, as you pointed out, there's a lot of options for putting to work on. Obviously, stay, fit, get into, a program, talk to your pro. And if they're not, as an example, TPI certified, which is in fitness, they certainly, most pros now know somebody who is certified or is experienced in golf fitness, because it is different than just going lifting weights at a regular gym. But, do whatever you can. And if there are options, the other thing that I like people to do is to work on your swing. You don't even have to have a club for this. Again, you can very cheaply go to your local hardware store and get a full length section of mirror. You don't even have to have it framed, just as long as it's not sharp. There's some no edging on it. Lean that if you got a basement or you got a room that you can go in, just enough so that you can see yourself and work on different things. What I like to do too, is I've mentioned to people, is to take some Scotch tape and run it right down the center of that mirror, and then take your setup and see as you're turning into your backswing. Again, you don't need a club. You can just put your hands across your shoulders, across your chest rather, and make a turn into your backswing. And that gives you an indication of whether you're swaying off the ball or swaying into your backswing. And then, swing, make your movement through as though you were doing a follow through, and see, watch yourself and see how things are doing. But, there's so many things that you can work on. There's no excuse, because the worst thing that you can do, and Clint, I think you would agree with this, is just to sit and do nothing, for 3 or 4 months and not do some of the things that you've mentioned and what I've just pointed out here, and then get out there and expect to pick up where you left off, or have to start the process again. So, do whatever you can, whatever you're able to do, certainly do that. This is a question too, this next one that, and again, I'm going to preface this a little bit. I remember watching on the Champions Tour on the Golf Channel. I can't remember what the segment was, but they would obviously have a lot of the pros coming on and doing their their tips and things. And Lee Trevino talked about the grip, and he said, when he pitches the ball, or when he's even chipping, he changes his grip a little bit from what he would with a normal swing. So what is the best grip that you have found to use? Again, we're talking about the short game, not talking about long pitch shots. I'm talking maybe chip or other areas or short pitches, or does it really matter? Can we just take one of the standard 3 where it's an interlock, overlapping, or a 10-finger grip? Or, as Lee talked about, he liked to strengthen that left hand a little bit more, and felt that it gave him sort of a more solid feel where his wrists were taken out of those shots. Do you have something that you recommend, or does it really matter? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's obvious it matters, because people have different styles of that. Personally, I just use my normal grip. I use overlap. grip, the Varden style grip. But I think that differently than changeable, I played with a good friend of mine today. Was in the tournament. He left-hand low chips because it just feels better doing that. Okay, putt standard, well, left-hand high, but he chips left-hand low, much like Fitzpatrick does, and chips very well. Okay, and so that works just fine. Success is success. Depending on how you get there is up to you, kind of, sort of. I also feel that if I'm chipping correctly, I want to take my left hand and, like Trevino says, maybe make it a little stronger. I like to feel like that I've got a little bit more outward bow in my left hand. I want to make sure it doesn't break down. Okay, so take my regular grip, and then I'm going to get my left wrist to move towards the target. If you can envision that, I'm going to bow my left wrist back. So that's going to make my wrist move towards the target, which is going to give me more of a pronounced hands in front of the club face. Okay, because if I make a mistake in chipping, is that breaking down? So I want to bow it out to give myself a little bit of a leg up. And so that, I think, is maybe what Trevino was doing as well, getting a little stronger bend or more pronounced left hand in front of the club head. Okay. That also gives me a little bit more of a downward blow on the chip. I see a lot of good pitchers and chipper of the ball that have that little bit more bowed left hand. They set up a little open, get the left hip in the impact position on the chips where there's not a lot of hip movement, and they bow that left hand out and it just helps them get the downward blow. Club head then's going to stay behind the left hand until impact, which just gives you a much crisper and more direct down and running type shot. So the grip does matter. I mean, I think the hand position is more important as far as where it's at in relationship to the club face. But whatever grip they like to go to interlock or overlap or 10-finger, I see some people that use their putter grip. We all have different styles of holding a putter, I guess. You see some of that. So really, to me, it comes down to what you feel comfortable with and that you can keep the hands in front of the club head through impact. And whatever that is fine with me. I do think there may be a little bit of experimenting and discovery that you could take place to get to that. But I guess the answer is it matters, but it's up to you. It's up to what you feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, and obviously everybody's is an individual and has their own style in that. I think really it just is going back to the example that Trevino was using. I think one of the reasons why he sort of was recommending that is a lot of people get very handsy, whether it's a pitch shot or whether it's chipping. And what he was trying to get across was that making some of the adjustments that he did with his grip. And again, whether it's interlocking, that was not really so much the point as, modifying it to, a slightly stronger grip with the left hand and so forth, was really to take the wrist hinge out of it a little bit more so that you weren't bumping into the back of, the ground behind the ball. He was trying to sort of solidify that grip a little bit more so that you were making better and more crisp contact. And that's just something that he's, obviously worked, but it may not work for everybody. But I think that's what he was the point he was trying to get across was sort of be less handsy in some of these shorter finesse shots. And obviously it worked very well for him because he had a good short game. So, but again, it works differently for everybody. The next question I have is again, it certainly is going to derive individual taste. There's sort of two rules of thought here when it comes to the short game. Do you change the club and not the swing? So, for instance, each scenario is different. Some people have a favorite club. If they're, chipping around the green, they may pick out, a certain club. Maybe it's a 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron, whatever it may be, maybe even a hybrid, depending on close. Is it okay, and is it beneficial for people to experiment a little bit and have more options as opposed to just sticking with one club and maybe reducing some of the options. In other words, have plenty of tools as an option in the tool bag. What are your thoughts here?
Well, it's obvious. The more different shots that I can produce gives me obviously more tools to use regardless of what the shot scenario is. So I've always had people to think of it this way, is that most courses today, if you're within a putter length or maybe a putter 2 lengths off the edge of the green, you can probably use your putter. You don't need to put it in the air. And the putter is designed to make it roll. So you just hit the back of the ball and let it roll through whatever it is. Then if you get beyond the 2 putter lengths and maybe another club, 3 putters, you might be able to hit the little 8-iron or 9-iron bump and run. Now, today the loft angles are so much different on people's clubs. We used to chip with a 7-iron. Now that's a pitching wedge, as far as loft angles. So you have to do a little experimenting on which one of those loft angles give you the shot. And then I've always liked to have, unless it's just some special scenario, the club outside of that 4 off the green, I would always try to get to where you got one club you go to, like a 54, 55-degree wedge, sand wedge, whatever you want to call it, and figure out how to use that club well, because you're going to hit those shots a lot. If you're hitting just a few greens around, you're going to hit that 15, 20-yard shot off the green a lot of times. So you want to have a club that you feel real comfortable with, putting the ball up in the air, let the club work for you, control some distances with it. But then you always need to have that really high lofted shot for a special scenario. What I see a lot of people doing is using a 60-degree wedge where they absolutely shouldn't be using it. It's a low percentage shot, but they see it on television, think, well, you got to put the ball way up in the air, let it stop and spin, all this fancy stuff. And it creates a lot of problems for them because they don't practice that shot enough to really be efficient at it. So what I would like to see them do, putt it if you can, bump and run, 7-iron, 8-iron, whichever one you like, and then find that real solid 54, 55 wedge that is kind of their go-to, but then have a 60-degree that you can, do the old flop shot with if you need to. But I've always been of the school of pick one and get good with it. And I think that's that 54, 55 wedge, the old standard sand wedge that we all grew up with. And you'd be surprised that you can hit a lot of different shots with that lofted club, and get real comfortable with it, get familiar with how the club reacts for you, and get good with that one club from that range, I think is the best approach.
Well said. Again, it depends on the individual. Obviously, some people have different levels of comfort. They might choose a favorite club and kind of stick with that. It may not always serve them well in every situation. But as you said, that sort of 54, 55-degree wedge is good to have as a standby. But then you also have to consider some other options, as you suggested. So I think it's really be afraid. Again, this is something that you do in that hour and a half practice session if you're willing to commit and work on some of those things and test them out. Test those out and see what works best for you, and make a note of that. And if you find one that let's say out of 10 shots, 50% of the time you're seeing some positive result, that may be one that you want to work on a little bit more and see if you can get that up to 70% of the time. If one, doesn't matter what you're doing, out of 10 shots, you're barely making 2 or 3 of them making anything happen, and you've tried that several times and still the same result, that may not be a route you want to try that right now. That may be something down the road. But so you want to certainly stick with something you're comfortable with, but don't be afraid to experiment. Again, as Nicholas always talked about in his golf, in his video Golf My Way, he would change the club depending on the shot he had. He wouldn't change his swing. So he used the same swing. Obviously, it's a little bit different in the short game, but essentially he used the same swing throughout his career, but he would just change the club, to adapt to whatever his need was for that particular shot. So I think that it's good that what you mentioned, and I think you raised some valid points. One of the other things that we come across is tension, especially in the shoulders. This can be sometimes a real killer, I think you would agree, for the short game. People get very tense, in their arms, and obviously it starts with the bigger muscles and that. And a lot of times what I find happens is they tense up over the shot, and then as they actually hitting the shot, sometimes the muscles will, believe it or not, can relax, and then you're out of your posture. So what are your thoughts here? How do we, one thing I sometimes recommend is really to let your shoulders really relax and almost feel like they're heavy right before you swing. So that way everything sort of, because if your shoulders are relaxed, your arms are going to relax, and so on down the food chain. What are your thoughts here?
Well, Ted, this is now you're getting into psychology now. I mean, that we all have major conversations about. But one of the things that I try to talk to my students and people just in general, most of the guys around here, before I get done with it, they think their head will be hurting, because we talk about so much of this stuff. And it really, they need to be conscious of how they're breathing, bring their heart rate down. So, yes, we want to relax. That's obvious. We don't want to have tension in our shoulders and our hands or body anywhere. So we have to, that's kind of a behavior. Again, we get tight over them. It triggers a response of that nature. So what we have to do is figure out, well, how am I going to manage it? What am I going to do about it? I'm not going to ignore it. It's going to happen. We're aware of it. So what are we going to do to bring that tension down? And just telling the person, oh, well, you just need to relax, that's probably not, they don't know, well, tell me how I'm supposed to relax. Well, I've found success with it over the years is take a few deep breaths, get your heart rate down. You can breathe and feel it just kind of as you breathe out, let your body relax, sink into your feet and your legs. Like you say, make your shoulders heavy, But you do that through proper breathing, because one of the things that happens, if you stand over the ball or anything and you're holding your breath and not breathing well, your body's going to go into panic mode. Your brain's going to say, whatever you're doing, let's get it over with, because I need to breathe again. Get done with it. Mm-hmm. And we tense up, we get quick and fast. So I would encourage people to look into, there's plenty of information out there. I mean, every one of us has got 100% of the world's knowledge in our pocket. So it's out there. You just go out and, search it, breathing. I don't want to really say get into yoga or whatever, but it is a lot of that idea of how do we relax our body, not just to say, hey, relax. Well, how am I supposed to do that? And most of the programs I have seen start with breathing exercises. To use your breath to bring the tension level down. And, just an old country boy like I am, it worked. I mean, so if you want to make those shoulders heavy, do it with your breathing. And it's not just that you're breathing. We're all going to breathe. It's whether you're paying attention to it.
Right.
Bring it down. Pay attention to your breath coming in and out to relax yourself. And it works wonderfully. And how that really helps a person to calm down before they hit a shot that they see as being a stressful shot. They're never going to not believe it's not stressful. Okay? It's important to them. So they're trying their best, and sometimes, obviously, like we know, we all try too hard, and that's where the tension comes in. Relax, bring the pressure down in order to give yourself the best chance of hitting the shot that you're wanting to hit. And I like your analogy of making your shoulders feel heavy, because that means I'm really letting everything kind of drop down into my hips and my legs, which is a really good relaxed position to be in, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. My father, when I was a youngster, would talk to me about things like that. And I can remember going to the breathing, I had a bad habit, which a lot of people do. And you're exactly right. Breathing is a huge thing. And I'm not just talking about regular breathing, like you would do day in, day out, really taking some good deep breaths in that, but making sure that you're breathing correctly, because what a lot of people do, and I'm sure you've seen this many times, and we're all guilty of it at some point, is they'll actually hold their breath. They'll get into, they're breathing and then right when they're ready to sort of execute that golf shot, they sort of take a breath in and they're holding it, and all of a sudden tension starts to creep in. So you have to actually breathe. And I was always taught, as you are coming through the shot, as you're coming in your downswing through the shot, you're exhaling. You're actually increasing the energy. You're expelling energy at the same time. If you're breathing in as you go back and breathing out as you come down, and if you do it effectively and correctly, and it's a lot easier than you think, you're going to find that you're going to execute much better shots because your body is going to be in rhythm. The tension is going to ease out of those trouble areas. But you're exactly right. Breathing is something, but, that was something my dad used to get on me when I was a kid. And he'd say to me, Ted, why are you holding your breath? Because I really didn't understand, proper breathing techniques. And you mentioned some other things. Yoga may not be for everybody, but those are some effective things as well. But the main underlying thing is you want to find whatever works for you to release the tension in your body. And that doesn't mean you just melt into the ground like soup, but you can't be tense standing over. And yes, that's where, the pros have learned over time through a lot of different techniques and obviously a lot of help, is they've learned to be able to relax themselves under pressure. The average Joe out there doesn't feel the pressure of a tour pro, but they do feel pressure when they're playing with their foursome, or if they're playing in a corporate event, or like you did earlier today in a charity event. They're nervous, so it's understandable. So having some techniques, if you will, and as you said, with the phones today and other pros out there that they can reach out to, there's a million opportunities out there to find some effective ways and find what works for you. But some great points there again, Clint.
Yeah,
I think
let me add this before we get away from it. If people want to see it in action, if they'll go back and pull up some videos of Phil Mickelson at Kiowa when he won the PGA there a couple of years ago, they will show the picture of him standing behind each shot with his eyes closed, breathing until he felt his body relax. Nicklaus did the same thing. That's why he stood over the ball and stood over the ball and stood over it until he felt his body calm down, and then he made his stroke. So we don't need to do what Nicklaus did, stand over it all day, but there are some very good techniques, and they're not all for everybody, but there are some good techniques in learning how to do that. But that was a prime example when Mickelson, they showed it, never commented on it. But you could see him just stand there until he felt his heart rate drop and his body relax, and then he went up and executed. And you're absolutely correct. We all have problems with holding our breath because we're so very, very important starting point for most of us to calm ourselves down, without a doubt.
Yep. And, you can do that before the round, during the round, and after the round. And if you practice those things, a great way, just one last thing, and then we'll move on. A great way to really implement that, first off, you have to learn how to breathe properly, because believe it or not, a lot of people breathe up in their upper chest, and that's not it. You have to take deep breaths, which go much lower into your lungs and that, and really, some people, it's almost like people who walk on their toes. They're not utilizing the full foot. So you have to learn how to. And there's a lot of great places, as you said, you can research it, to develop proper breathing techniques. And you can do this before you get on the, out in the practice tee, work on that and start to regulate your breath. And you'll find that your practice sessions will become much more enjoyable, less stressful, and you'll see better results because your body is going to get into a relaxed state. Because I see people all the time up there, and I can tell by watching them what they're doing. Some people just get up there and they're, it's not just a matter of they're having good technique in hitting golf balls. They actually know how to regulate their body to put themselves in a relaxed state, not just mentally, but physically as well. and that takes practice. So it's just like your game, you've got to practice that as well, and you'll find you're going to be a much more effective player all the way around. Another one, too, is you've got to consider your options. Maybe take a less risky path. You kind of gave a similar scenario earlier, where maybe you hit your driver and whatever club, it might be a 6-iron, and you came up a few yards short of the green. So now you're in a situation where you're not even in between clubs, but you've got a very tricky shot. Maybe you've got a front cut pin and not a lot of room to work with. You have to really think about your strategy here. So again, it's going to vary depending on the handicap, but what are some options here? What would you recommend, say, for a high handicap person that's in that situation that needs to maybe choose a less risky path? Give us, with this example, if you want, or if you have another one you prefer, what would be your recommendation for somebody that's in that situation? What should they do to get the best opportunity to maybe save par or prevent from getting a bogey or double bogey?
Right. Okay. So what the scenario you're discussing is I've hit a good drive and I'm in between clubs. Can't maybe get it onto the green or things.
Well,
of that
they've come up. They've come up short. Yeah, they've hit a drive and they've checked the 6-iron or 7, whatever it is, and they've fallen short. So now they're in a position where they're off the green and they've got this little shot maybe they need to get.
Yeah. I mean, that comes down to how much, to me, all right, how many different shots am I capable of hitting reasonably successful? Okay. And I came up knowing that, hey, give your putter a chance. So I'm going to try to get the ball into a position that gives me the easiest putt. Okay. Now, so that generally means, hey, I want to try to be, on the fall line side of the hole, which obviously is below the hole. And I want to try to figure out if I can get this chip or pitch, depending on what the difficulty is. I mean, if I'm short-sided over a bunker, I'm just trying to get it on the green where I can maybe make a putt or 2 putt at the worst and going about the next hole. But if I've got a shot where I'm pretty confident, I'm looking at where I want to putt from. I see a lot of people make a mistake. They got a relatively simple pitch, a little 55 or 60 degree if they got to, or a little chip and run. And they chip the ball, literally trying to make it instead of thinking about where do I want to putt from? Where do I want to putt this ball from? And I want to try to get it in that area. I don't have to be dead specific, but I want to get it down there where I think I got an easier putt. There was a great example of this a couple of years ago. I think it may have been in the U.S. Open with Jordan Spieth and his caddy. Jordan had this real difficult pitch from the long grass on the short side, and they went down there and tried to figure out, okay, where do I want to putt from? Where do I want to try to get this ball to give me the easiest putt I can get? Because I'm going to have to make a putt here. I'm going to have to make a 10, 15-footer. So where's the easiest 10-footer for me to try to get this ball to? And they played to that point, and he made the putt, saved his par. So when you get into these circumstances where you've maybe not hit too bad a shot, you're up around the green, you're maybe inside the cylinder of the bunkers, try to get an idea, where do I want to putt from? If you got time, go up and see, quick look, where do I want to putt from? Where's the easiest putt? And try to get the ball in that general area, because I see a lot of times people chip the ball and they got it, greens are kind of quick and they chip the ball past the hole up the hill, and now they got a harder shot now than they had when they were chipping. They got a little downhill 10, 12-footer that they made 3-putt. I want to get, I just don't want to make a double making, 3-putting from 15 feet when I could have maybe pitched it over there and got a 10-footer up the hill, that I'm not going to be chipping this ball into a harder shot than the one I'm just about ready to hit. So there just takes a little bit of strategy, but a little practice, but primarily trying not to get the ball in a position that I have a trickier shot than the one I'm going to hit. And what that means to me is where's my easiest putt, and try to get it in that general area of the green in relationship to the slope of the green.
Well said. And I think just in conclusion, if I was to sum up tonight's discussion, I think there are a couple of key takeaway points that I think people should keep in mind. Number one, all through the season, but particularly in the off season for some of you, is you want to continue to keep yourself in shape, and you want to practice what you can. If it's only putting, that's great. You can always be working on your grip and things and stance and posture, all those things too. But you want to be working on something through the off season that is going to benefit you, particularly in your short game. If you've got the facility or the ability to work on some of the chipping and pitching that we talked about, whether you have an inside facility that allows you to do that, great. If you don't, then work on some of the things that Clint had mentioned as well. The other thing is, when you're playing, always assess your game. Don't make changes mid-round, but make mental notes or even jot it down on your scorecard somewhere of some of the struggles that you've had through that round, and then focus on that. Focus your practice sessions on that. Make good use of your time. Don't just get out there and hit and rake balls, but actually focus on some of the key areas that you're struggling with. Develop a strategy along the way. Find out what works best for you. And always consider your options, and that comes parcel with assessing your game. And, choose the right club for you, but don't be afraid to consider other options as well and work on those. And then whether it's through breathing techniques or some other, thing, work on, releasing that tension in your body so that when you're up over the ball, no matter what situation, whether you're by yourself or in a group or playing in some event somewhere, work on, really releasing that tension. And I think, there's a lot of specific techniques that may help you develop a more strict short game. And the best way to do that is to see your local teacher professional and get some help in those areas. But I think that covers pretty much everything. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great Cliff Notes version of what we talked about today. It's all right there in a summary. But I think I could add to it, get some good instructions if you need it, but practice. Spend time with it. Golf is a user sport, and you just can't think your way to a better short game. You can think your way into a better, program, but you just have to get out and use it if you expect to be successful with it. And that, to me, is the biggest problem I see with people. They just think they can think their way to a better stroke. And it's just like, and I'll just say it real quickly, it's kind of like, well, I can read a book about how Sam Snead played golf, but I surely can't go outright without doing it and play the way Sam Snead did. You have to practice. You have to use it and learn through practical experiences with it, and you'd be amazed how much more proficient and good you'll be at some of those shots if you just pay attention to them and do a little work.
Yep, exactly. Practice, but also mindful practice, making sure that you're practicing the right things, because you can get out there and practice the wrong things and just make matters worse. So that's why it's good to get in touch with your local professional if you need that help. But Clint, as always, I enjoy our conversations. You always add some great insight, and hopefully, those tuning into the program will have some takeaways from our discussions. But as always, give you an opportunity to let the folks know if they want to reach out to you, the best way they can do that. And if there's anything that you'd like to plug, by all means, go ahead.
Nothing to plug tonight, Ted. It's been a great show. I enjoy doing it. And if people want to reach out to me, it's clintgolf001@yahoo.com, and I respond to the emails quite a bit. And like I said, I've always enjoyed doing the show. Look forward to doing many more in the future. And I hope that people do take to heart some of the things we talk about, and because I know we sincerely hope that people get better at our game, because if they do, guess what? They'll have more fun. They play more golf, and our sport becomes healthy. And that's what we look for.
Exactly. Well said. All right, my friend, have a great weekend. Thank you, as always, for joining me here on Coach's Corner segment of the program. And I look forward to you coming back next month and joining me once again. So have a great weekend.
All right.
Thanks, as always.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Thanks. Bye.
All right, that was Clint Wright joining me on the Coach's Corner panel segment of the show. We'll be right back after this quick break with my very special guest tonight, Terry Koehler. We'll be right back.
The following ad is sponsored by Golf Tips Magazine.
Are you tired of being short off the tee? And what about those 3 putts? Forget about it. It's time you got serious about your game. Golf Tips, the most in-depth magazine in the industry. For over 30 years, Golf Tips has delivered expert content such as the latest golf instruction from America's top pros, simple to follow practice and game improvement drills, fitness and mental game tips, equipment, training aids, accessory and apparel reviews, golf destinations and travel tips for every budget, and so much more. Don't miss a single issue. Go to golftipsmag.com and subscribe today.
All right, welcome back to the show, and thank you, as always, for joining me here live on Golf Talk Live. Just a quick program note, or a mention rather, as I've talked about here over the last several weeks during the show, the end of October, the 27th through to the 29th, Golf Tips will be hosting a golf school at Macklemore up in the atop the Lookout Mountain in Georgia. We're closed off now. We've already booked that solid, so really excited about working with some of the folks up there, and some of the members of the top 25 instructors are going to be joining me as well. So I'm really excited about that, and we'll be shooting some video while we're there, and hopefully get some instructional video in there. So we'll be posting that on the website and elsewhere. So keep an eye out. But I'm really excited about doing that. Macklemore is a great resort, and if you want to learn more about Macklemore, go to themacklemore.com is their website, and they've got a great golf course there and some great amenities as well, and a new hotel that's going to be opening up, I believe, either later this fall or very early spring, presented by Hilton. So really excited to see how that goes, and so check it out at themacklemore.com. But Golf Tips will be there at the end of October from the 27th to the 29th. So stay tuned. I'll have some great videos and images coming back from that golf school. All right, as I mentioned earlier in the broadcast, I'm once again joined by a very, very special guest, Terry Koehler. He's the chairman and director of innovation at Edison Golf. We had a great discussion last time, and I know we're going to have a great one this time. And so I'm going to bring him out and not waste any time me talking, but let's see what Terry has to say, and some great information that I'm sure he'll share with the audience tonight. So please welcome my very special guest, Terry Koehler. Terry, welcome back.
Hey, it's great to be back. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, I appreciate it. We had a lot to talk about the last time, and I know that there were a lot of things that you really wanted to hopefully get into, and I said, well, the only way we're going to do that is if you come back. So here you are, and we're going to get into that. So I want to ask you just a few general questions first, just to sort of get things started and warmed up, if you will. And then we'll get into some specific things I know that you'd probably like to discuss. So in your experience, what do you consider to be some good characteristics of a good wedge? What are some of the things that when you're looking for a wedge, if you were to go out and buy, forgetting who you are and what you do, if you're looking for a good wedge, what are some of the characteristics you're looking for and why?
Well, I'm a big believer that I think you can try out drivers and even irons maybe in the indoor hitting bay with launch monitors giving you your numbers. But I've always believed that you have to go take a wedge out to the golf course that you play, and the kind of turf conditions you run into, the kind of shots you face every round, from your full swing wedge shots to your mid-range shots to your little delicate shots around the greens. You have to really put a wedge through the paces the way you play golf and where you play golf. And that's a challenge for picking out wedges, because a lot of times they're not going to let you take the wedge to the golf course, but that's the only way to try. I've always been kind of a cynic, if you will, about bounce fitting, because we run into all kinds of different lies in a round of golf. We can run into all kinds of different swing paths. I mean, sometimes we nip the ball clean, sometimes we take a bigger divot. And so I think, what I'm looking for in a wedge, the first thing I'm going to look for is, does this wedge have a shaft that blends to my irons? So, almost all the wedges on the retail displays have a medium to heavyweight steel shaft in them, stiff flex. And so many golfers, particularly seniors, are playing lighter graphite, softer steel. The first thing that wedge has to do to perform for you is it has to have a shaft that's that what I call blends seamlessly to your irons. It doesn't have to be the exact same brand, but it needs to be comparable in weight and flex to what's in your irons because that's what you're used to. So that's, to me, if you're asking, the first thing you look for is if that wedge doesn't have a shaft that's pretty close to what's in your irons, walk by. Leave it alone. Do not think that you can make that wedge work.
Right. Yeah, there's always a lot of variables too, and I know you touched on a little bit of that. Something I want you to explain a little bit. I found it very interesting because, again, most people don't probably would never even have thought of this. You know, as we all know, there's several grooves on the face of the wedge, and you raised some interesting thoughts last time, and you mentioned about how the difference between sort of our average high handicap golfer, where on that club face, what grooves are being utilized with those wedges, as opposed to a tour pro. Can you explain that again, and why? What the difference is? Where are they hitting it on the wedge on the face, and what grooves predominantly are most tour pros hitting it, as opposed to say some of our higher handicappers, and how that makes a difference?
Well, I think that's probably the biggest challenge for recreational golfers from low single digit to mid double digit to high double digit. The tour players are magicians with their wedges. You have to understand that these guys are great wedge players not because of their wedges. They're great wedge players because every day they go out and hit hundreds and hundreds of wedge shots. So, they hit more wedge shots an average day than your typical recreational golfer might hit in a year. So, they're honing these skills through incessant practice, and they've learned that with the wedges they play, the tour design wedges, it will lump almost all wedges into that category, whether they're the Titleist Smoky, the Cleveland, the Callaway, the TaylorMade. These clubs are all pretty much the same. If you strip away the graphics, you look at them, they're all pretty much the same. The weight is in the bottom. And the tour players have learned you have to make contact down in that second, third, fourth groove in order to get that club to perform like it's supposed to. But I've looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of wedges from recreational golfers, and the wear pattern is 3 to 4 grooves higher. It's the size of a silver dollar, not a penny. And, we're looking for forgiveness. And your listeners, 95% of you are playing some kind of a game improvement iron. You're playing 2 or 3 hybrids in your bag, and you're trying to game the same wedges the tour players are gaming. And that just doesn't work. These wedges are very finicky about how they perform. And that's, again, a shameless self-plug, but when I approached the design of the Edison wedges, in the evolution of the wedges I've designed for 30 years, I said, let's design the wedge around the impact pattern that I've seen on these hundreds and thousands of wedges that is the size of a silver dollar. It's centered up around the 5th or 6th groove. Let's just build a wedge to perform with that pattern. And that's really the difference between Edison and all the other wedges. I'm not designing for tour players. I'm designing from the observation of hundreds or thousands of wedges that I've looked at over the years of how even good amateur players, 3, 4, 5 handicap golfers, are still hitting the ball a little higher in the face than the tour player does.
And, again, I think it's easier, and I think you'd probably agree, to design, as what you're doing, a product that's going to meet the needs of the average golfer than trying to force them to become a tour player, in the sense that, in other words, the tour players are, again, spending hours upon hours every single day crafting, so they're able to make those fine-tune adjustments. But somebody that's maybe a weekend warrior that plays once a week, maybe even twice a week, they don't have that. So trying to teach them to strike the ball like a tour player and so forth is not going to work in most cases. They might get a few that might be able to get the grasp of it, but essentially what they need to do is have the right equipment in their hand. And obviously you do have to have some technique as well, but primarily what you're really focusing on here is let's get them fitted with the right equipment as opposed to try to retrain them to the level of a tour player, which is next to impossible for the majority of people. Is that a fair and accurate statement, do you think?
I think it's a pretty accurate statement. And, when you think about the recreational golfer that's, getting his round of golf in or her round of golf in on Saturday or Sunday, or maybe playing 2 or 3 days a week, your skills are so far from a tour player. And that's why you're playing some cavity back irons. That's why you put hybrids in the bag instead of trying to carry a 2, 3, or 4 iron. It's why you're playing this big 460cc driver. You're looking for golf clubs that will let you have more fun, that, you're making reasonably solid contact, but you're not making perfect contact, but you still, hey, I hit that 7 iron a little out on the toe, but it still got on the front of the green, or I hit that, that 9 iron a little high in the face, but it still got on the green. Well, why do we not demand that same forgiveness from wedges? And, a golf club is a simple device in most respects, and there's a lot of rocket science in our industry now. But the golf ball doesn't know who's on the other end of the handle of that golf club. It doesn't know if it's a 16-year-old teenage girl or if it's a 65-year-old guy or if it's a 30-year-old guy that's big and strong. All that golf ball can react to is the dynamics of the golf club and the dynamics of impact. And, very simply, I have a different master, if you will, in the design of my wedges. My master is the 5 to 20 handicap golfer who's playing this game for fun. And it's more fun when the ball ends up closer to the hole, and that's what drives me every day.
Right. And that's what makes it exciting. And again, as we talked about the last time, the purpose of really this discussion, in addition to obviously, exposing Edison Golf, to more folks and giving, we're going to talk about some of the things a little bit later that you have put in place, that Edison has put in place to help customize and make that a much easier and smoother transition to getting the right equipment in their hands. But, I'm not here to, certainly, and I know you're not, to criticize anything else in the market. But again, they're catering to really in their design for, a higher level player. They're basically building their products for the tour. And, the rest of us are just sort of, I guess, lucky enough to pick one up. But it's really what it's being designed around. And you wanted to, as you pointed out a few moments ago, you really took a different approach, because the percentage of people that are ever going to make it on tour is very small. Whereas, conversely, the everyday folks, it's a much bigger percentage. So you're really designing the needs for recreational golfers, as you said, and not the tour and professionals, which typically is done in this industry. And you, as you pointed out, you've had the opportunity to watch and observe the average golfer hit their wedges and get a lot of feedback and data. In addition to the equipment, what are some of the other factors that you've noticed through the data that you're receiving that the typical average golfer is doing wrong?
Well, I write a blog every week, and I try to share insights and instruction. And the article I just penned in the last couple of days, it'll go up in the next couple of days, is, how to guarantee you won't get better at golf. And, I'm always amazed that there's 2 parts of golf that require zero athletic ability, and that is learning how to hold the club properly and learning how to set up and posture yourself for a golf shot properly with the right alignment, the right ball position. Neither of these things take any athletic ability at all. And what frustrates me is to watch golfers, who are holding the club. I had a friend of mine one time way back in my career. He said, that guy holds the golf club like a ham sandwich. And that always sticks with me when I think about it. But, the golf grip is not a personal thing, except in a very narrow parameter. And, we have the overlap grip. When Tiger Woods came about, the interlock grip came into much more vogue. Prior to that, Jack Nicklaus and Tom Kite were about the only 2 guys on tour that use the interlock grip, because both of them have very, very small hands. And Tiger made the interlock grip more common. I think the interlock grip tends to move the club into your palms too much. But whether you overlap or interlock or use a 10-finger grip, which I do not like the term baseball grip. You do not hold a golf club like a baseball bat. But the 10-finger grip, I think, is good for seniors and ladies who have juniors who have lesser hand strength. But there's a proper way to hold a golf club, and it's not individual. And by the same token, if you go watch PGA Tour golf, you go watch LPGA golf, if you look at these elite players, they look identical other than their height. Nelly Korda is 6 feet tall, and the next LPGA player over here may be 5'4". But if you look at the posture and ball position and setup, all the top-notch golfers look exactly alike. They may have little movement differences in their swing, but if you can't tell the difference from one to the other in the way they set up to the golf ball for the most part. These are not things that you can individualize. And I closed the article, and it'll be published next couple of days. I said, Frank Sinatra made a fortune singing My Way, but nobody ever has been successful playing golf my way. It's the way.
Right.
If you want to really be good at this game, you need to learn how to hold the club properly, because that allows the body and the swing to move like it's supposed to, and you need to learn how to set up properly to the golf ball. And if you get the right hold on the club and the right starting position, making a sound golf swing becomes much easier. But if you're holding the club improperly, if you're standing and setting up to the ball in a wild, non-conventional, non-fundamental way, your body cannot move the way it's kind of like you can't drive a race car from the passenger seat. You have to be behind the wheel to drive the car, and you say, well, I prefer to drive from the passenger seat. Well, you're going to kill yourself. I'm sorry, it's not personal. You need to get behind the wheel of the car so your feet can get on the accelerator and the brake. And so, but I think golfers, a lot of golfers out there trying to figure it out on their own. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and he said, he was talking about, he says, well, it's not brain surgery. And I said, no, brain surgery must be a lot easier, because there are more brain surgeons in the world than there are people making a living playing golf. So, maybe it is harder than brain surgery, this game that we've all tackled.
Well, and it is, even the best players, you mentioned Tiger and Jack, have all said that nobody ever really masters this game. I mean, Tiger, people were as with Jack in his day, were just dumbfounded at the abilities and the shots that these guys were hitting and the level of play. But even they did not master. They certainly played better than many other of their competitors in many ways, and obviously were smarter. It wasn't just that they were physically hitting the ball, because they weren't hitting it better than everybody else on tour. As you said, that there are many great players out there, but they knew how to play the game at such a high level and were able to dial in on the things that they felt were important, and that's why they were so successful. I mean, otherwise, if it was as simple as what some people, have tried to make it, everybody would be winning all the time. So, but you're right, a good foundation and a good grip is a crucial starting point. I want to point something out, because this is an area that a lot of people, but I want to read something first that a lot of people struggle understanding, and I'd like you to, if you wouldn't mind explaining. So back in 92, I mentioned this the last time you were on the show, but I want to reiterate this. Back in 92, you patented the Koehler sole, which was the first and still only wedge sole to combine both a high and low bounce into each of your wedges to make them versatile from any kind of lie and obviously swing path. So my question for you is the bounce being used incorrectly? If so, how?
Well, there's so much dialogue, and I've, because I write the blog and I get feedback every week, and because I love talking to golfers about things, I think bounce and grinds are the most misunderstood, elements of golf. And I like to work with people that are eager beginners, that want to learn how to do it right. I really have no interest in working with people going, well, yeah, but I don't want to do it that way. Well, then keep doing it your way, and I got things to do, But an eager beginner that really wants to learn, one of the things that I think is the easiest way to explain what the bounce is in the bottom of a golf club, in a wedge particularly, is what I see beginners trying to help the ball in the air. You cannot hit up on a golf ball because it's sitting on the ground. So it's physically impossible to hit up on the ball because the ball is sitting on the ground. So you have to hit down and through the ball. And one of the kind of explanations I've come up with that people seem to understand is this club in your hand is called a wedge. So what you want to do is you want to wedge the golf club between the ball and the earth. So the loft of the club is going to make the ball go up, and that downward angle of the sole, which is called bounce, is going to prevent the club from digging in the ground. And one of the things that I like to show people is learn how to swing that wedge with your left hand, your lead side. I don't like the term right-handed to left-handed golf, and I'll go into that. Why not? But the game is played with your lead side. If you stand on the right side of the ball, the swing is controlled with your right side. It's the lead side. If you stand on the left side of the ball facing the target, then the swing has got to be controlled with the lead side, which is your left side. It's not played with your hands. It's played with your lead side. But my point is, I like to get people saying, I want you to feel the bottom of that club kind of slapping the ground and get away from the golf ball. Golf ball is a huge intimidator to try to learn something. But, just take that club back and forth and feel that bottom of that club slapping or bouncing off the ground. And that's when you learn how to engage the bounce of the golf club. The wedges have a downward angle in the sole called bounce. Forget nuanced grinds and all that. But it's designed so that club will reject off the turf, whether it's a bunker. Wedges were kind of invented when Gene Sarazen back in the 30s, credited with inventing the sand wedge. But the whole idea is to literally bounce that club off of the turf just as it's making contact with the ball. I hope that's a decent explanation. That's the best I got.
Well said, Terry. No, that explains it very well. And I wanted people, because again, this also is something that you have to consider when you're making a club selection, not just when you're out in the golf course, but if you're getting ready to purchase a wedge. Those are factors that you need to understand. It's not just how it looks and who's made it and so forth, that you need to understand, is the club that you're using, are you able to utilize the bounce correctly? And because there are so many different versions out there and different options, you have to make sure that you're fitted properly. And we're going to talk a little bit about that when you explain the experience that a listener would have going through Edison's process. But first, what I want to do is for you to explain first off, what goes into the design of a wedge. Obviously, I'm talking about Edison wedge. And what are some common factors that you consider personally that are important as a club designer? What are you looking for when you're designing that wedge? You're obviously gathering information through the customization process, or if you're seeing them face to face and you're watching them and you're looking at some of the things, having a discussion. So there's a lot to go in. There's a lot of factors to consider. What are some of the personal factors that you look at, and what specifically goes into designing a wedge?
So I've been designing wedges for 30 years, and so each wedge that I've done has been a reflection of a learning process from the wedge before it, if that makes sense. So, we see the evolution in the golf equipment, and I think back, I'm 71 years old. When I took up golf in the 50s as a little kid and through the 60s and even in the 70s, woods were made of wood and irons were blades basically. And, we had bullseyes and 8802 putters and some rake hooks in there, mallets. But, the evolution of golf equipment has been dynamic. But one of the things I think about is if I'm standing in the fairway 55 yards from the hole, I've got the same goal in mind that, a tour player has, that Jack Nicklaus had in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that Ben Hogan had in the 40s and 50s, that Bobby Jones had in the 30s, 20s. The objective is to loft the ball in the air, fly it to the flag, and make it stop. And the equipment, if the objective hasn't changed, what we've done with equipment is try to make that easier to do. And, of course, I think the biggest evolution in golf clubs is in the driver category. Obviously, that's rocket science in drivers, and there's so many good ones on the market. Fairway woods have followed along with that. The advent of the hybrids was a godsend to people who, 2, 3, 4, 5 irons, clubs under 25, 26 degrees aloft are hard to hit. But I think the modern technologies in golf clubs have harmed us at the scoring end of the set, because we're applying 6-iron technologies to our 9-irons and P clubs, as I call them, and even into the approach clubs. And they're not really wedges anymore. They're 6-irons with 50 degrees aloft. And that, what people don't stop to think about, if you go for an iron fitting, I hope I'm not rambling. If you go for an iron fitting,
No.
you're going to hit 6-irons in a hitting bay on the launch monitor. In today's world, that's a 27 to 29 degree golf club. And then they're going to say, here, we're going to build your set of irons off that. They're going to try to sell you all the way out to your approach wedge, which is a 50-degree golf club. Okay, so your approach wedge is further from your 6-iron than your driver is in loft.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever said, I love my 6-iron, can you make me a driver like this? No, your 6-iron, your driver is maybe 15, 16, 18 degrees aloft, but your 6-iron to your approach wedge is 20 or 22 degrees aloft. And so when I approach the design of a golf club, I approach it as, and I got into a big kind of an interview with Matt Saturnis at Plugged In Golf about what is a wedge. Well, how do you define a wedge? Is it about the loft? Is it about the sole design? What is it? And I don't really like the nomenclature wedge anymore. I'm trying to design you a club at 45 to 47 degrees, 49 to 50 degrees, 52 or 3 degrees, 55, 57, 59 or 60. I'm trying to design you golf clubs that are going to do what is supposed to happen when you have a club of that loft in your hand. And I want a high spin rate. I want a penetrating trajectory. I want a sole that will reject out of the turf properly. And so what I'm looking at is it's just a golf club. You can call it an iron, you can call it a hybrid, you can call it a wedge, you can call it anything you want. But if you're standing in the fairway with a 49-degree golf club in your hand for a 110-yard shot or an 85-yard shot or 140 or whatever your strength profile is, you have a set of expectations of what that ball needs to do off of that golf club. So I'm not bound by what wedges, quote, are supposed to look like. I'm not bound by what a tour player doesn't want me to change in his golf club. And, we were doing a member guest, we were doing a little pitching contest at our local member guest contest last weekend at our member guest tournament. And I had a 50-quart cooler sitting out at 15 yards. And the deal was to hit the ball in the cooler, and you qualify for the shootout. And I watched so many people, just not having a clue of how they want to hit a 15-yard wedge shot. And, from 15 yards, I need to loft the ball in the air with a controllable trajectory, and I need to make it stop reasonably close to where it lands. And so when I approach wedge design, I'm kind of rambling, but back to your question, I'm looking at what do I need this 54-degree golf club to do to the golf ball in the frame of shots that it will likely be used for. And so I put a lot more mass high in the golf club. The club's got loft. It's going in the air, and I want to give you forgiveness. If you hit it a little on the toe, you hit it a little high in the face, you hit it a little low in the face. I want to give you, if you're trying to hit it 22 yards, I want to give you, 19 to 25 yards over as big an area of that face as I possibly can. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes perfect sense. And that's the point.
So I don't follow other design principles on wedges because I don't have a tour player that's telling me this launch is too hot, or it launches too low. Or I don't care about that tour player. Bob Bokeh, Roger Cleveland are brilliant. I mean, those guys have massive teams to take care of their tour players, and that's great. I've worked with tour players. That's just not where I am now. My master is the 8 to 20 handicapper trying to play golf 1 or 2 days a week and get the most out of his afternoon or his morning or her morning.
Well, and that's exactly, the point I made earlier is, you really approach this from sort of the opposite side of the coin. A lot of the manufacturers with everything is sort of focusing, and I understand why, and you know, it's admirable, obviously, but the truth of the matter is the average golfer continues to struggle. And one of the reasons is because the equipment's not really, for the most part, I'm not referring to yours, but for the most part, is not really designed for them. And so they're struggling to sort of make ends meet, if you will, out on the golf course because the equipment they're using is not really designed. And you can be fitted and all of that. But again, you know, they're more often than not, they're playing with a driver that the loft is not high enough. And, you know, they're struggling to make good solid contact. And, yeah, you have 460 cc, so you can hit it anywhere, and there is some forgiveness. But, again, they're still struggling. The handicaps, I mean, the stats don't lie. Handicaps have not budged much in the last 20 to 30 years for the average golfer. And the reasons is because the equipment is not being designed. So, really, you know, in a nutshell, what you're trying to do with Edison and the wedges that you're developing is you're trying to give them an opportunity to go out and enjoy, have fun with the game, and you know, if they happen to have a little bit of a mishit, there's forgiveness built into the design of the club, and not just into the marketing pitch, and that's what really people are looking for. Is they want to go out and have fun. I mean, and if they're having fun, they're going to be more inclined to work on their game and spend time. If they're not having fun, then the clubs are just collecting dust in the garage. And I think that pretty much sums up how a lot of the average golfers feel. And I know you heard that, like you said, thousands upon thousands of times. So give us some of the feedback that you hear from golfers that you've worked with, from the average golfers that have been, you know, fitted properly with the Edison wedge, and what has been some of the biggest gains that they're seeing? What has been some of the feedback? How has it helped their game?
But what we hear the most is, and we sell everything with 100% risk-free trial. If you have one of my wedges and you don't like it, I'd rather you send it back to me for a refund than to tell your friends you have an Edison wedge you don't like. We get about 3 out of 100 back, and 2 of those people thought we were in the miracles business, and we're not in the miracles business. And I will tell you that the closer you get to the hole, the harder the game gets in today's golf. And you're talking about golfers not getting better. I saw a piece of information the other day that was what the stiff meter readings were at top courses around the country in 1977. And the fastest greens in the country were at Oakmont, which was an 8.1 stimp. The average person today is going to go on to a decent municipal golf course, and if they're 8.1, he's going to complain about slow greens. And, I mean, the golf courses have gotten harder around the greens, the green complexes, the bunkers, the shaved collars, the speed and firmness of the greens. The game is harder, I think, than it ever has been. And I think this is a bad thing, but everybody wants to outdo the other. They want their greens to roll 12 and 13 on the stimp, and the green wasn't designed for that. And so people are on the green too long. They can't chip it close to the hole. And the other thing, I think, and I'm on the golf committee at our club and the greens committee as well. And I brought up in a conversation the other day, I was talking to one of my friends at the club, and Jim is 83, and he hits it pretty good, but, you know, he's just not that long. And he said, you know, my handicap's all the way up to 21. And I said, Jim, you're playing a par 84 golf course. Your handicap is 7. Because you've got 2 par 6s that you cannot get home with 3 shots. You've got 7, 8, 9 par 5s that you cannot get home with a driver and a 3-wood. I said, you're playing, you know, move up. And he said, well, there aren't. I said, play it from wherever you want to play in the fairway. But if I play the men's regular tees and number 1 is a driver and a gap wedge, you're not supposed to be hitting a driver and a 4 into that hole. Move up, you know, and I think this is a problem in our game is that, you know, courses are long. Everybody's focused on the tour guy and all that. But, you know, I read a statistic, I think it was the 2021 season, of all the par 4 holes all season long, Dustin Johnson hit 1 approach shot with more than a 7-iron in a season.
Right.
That's the way the game is being played at the highest level. It is being played with short irons. And so for the big guns, if you're playing a golf course that you're hitting, you know, 8 or 10 approach shots with more than a 7-iron, you're playing a harder golf course than the tour guy plays. because he's driving 1 or 2 short par 4s. He's hitting a 5 or 6 iron to all the par 5s on his second shot. He doesn't have a par 5. And the game is not supposed to be driver 3-wood wedge to a medium length par 4. And so I think this is one reason why golfers, quote, are not getting better, because the courses are getting too dang hard. And, the tour player can manage a short game and putting on a, 11 or 12 stemp green, but the rest of amateur golfers are not skilled enough to do that. That's dicey golf. And so that's kind of one of my beefs about the game being too hard today because of, the type of golf courses being built. I mean, when I was a kid in the 50s, putting was the easiest part of the game. Chipping was the second easiest part. Short iron play was the third easiest. Middle iron play was fourth. And hitting persimmon driver was the hardest part of the game. And the game is completely reversed in today's world. Hitting driver is easy. Everybody can hit a driver. You got a big old 460cc head, the ball sitting up on the 3-inch tee. That's the easiest part of the game. But I watch so many golfers, and I admonish people all the time. I said, count the number of strokes you took today inside 35 yards. Because it should not be 3 and 4 and 5 shots to get it in the hole. But everybody wants to go out to and I get into this kind of, just kind of oddball stuff because I'm a contrarian. Why do we call them driving ranges? They should be called practice ranges. Driving range implies I go to the range and I hit a bunch of drivers, and, what you really need to do is hit a bunch of 20-yard wedge shots, and it doesn't wear you out. And go hit 100 of them and learn how to hit those little shots. But, and what I'm really amazed at is that so many golfers, they really don't – I don't think they care to get better. They want to just go play golf and have fun. So they don't go to the range. They don't practice. They don't stretch every day. They don't hit, to even take one. I mean, I watch guys at my club that I play golf with regularly. They get out of their car, put the clubs on the cart, they go to the first tee, and they take one practice swing, and then they go after it. Well, you're not giving yourself much of a chance to play good.
No, you're exactly right, Terry. And I've said this as a teaching professional for years. I mean, if you want to become a better player, and that doesn't mean you don't practice it, but don't focus all of your effort on hitting it off the tee. I mean, you only have so many holes that you're going to tee up your driver, and the rest of it is really your short game. And I'll even go further, even from 100 yards in, most average golfer struggles to get it close and up and down. And if you're losing strokes in your short game, but you're practicing the long game on the driving range or the practice area, and this was what Clint and I on the Coach's Corner panel just before you came on, we're talking about was the short game, some ideas to really focus on. And, a lot of people don't want to do it because the truth of the matter is, and I know we're kind of getting off topic here a little bit, but I just want to add this last bit and then we'll move on. But is through very effective marketing, it's this sort of grip it and rip it mentality, and people have sort of twisted their game around to, okay, let's see how far I can hit it because that's going to help me score better. And really, it's the opposite. If you can hit it 150 to 200 yards reasonably straight, you can virtually play most golf courses as far as distance-wise. Where you run into the problem, as you pointed out, the greens are much faster. And it looks like, sorry, I apologize, I'm going to stop midstream. It looks like I lost Terry here temporarily, so I'll wait for him to come back. But anyways, I'll just sort of finish my thought as I wait for him to come back in. But, this is unfortunately for you listeners out there, this has become an area that many, many golfers focus on, is they're focusing on the long game and not their short game. And it needs to be the opposite. But when Terry comes back on here, it looks up. There he is. Sorry about that. Welcome back, Terry. This will be the third time, I guess. No, I don't know either. Sometimes it happens. You get dropped. But I finished the thought while you were off, so I don't need to repeat it. It was really more for the audience. But I agree with you that the courses need to change in order to be able to make it a more pleasurable experience. The one thing I want to sort of wrap us up with is, I mentioned earlier, is, you have put together really what you call wedge fit at Edison. and this gives them. Talk about a little bit about the process. So what happens here if somebody contacts you and or contacts Edison and says, okay, I'm interested in the wedges. What's the process? What do you recommend I do to make sure I'm getting fitted with the proper wedges? So walk me through a little bit of I know you can't do everything, but walk me through a little bit of the process. What happened?
Well, what Wedge Fit is it's been an evolving tool that I created almost 20 years ago, and I've reviewed over 75,000 golfer Wedge Fit profiles. And what Wedge Fit is designed to do is to walk you through a Q&A process so that we can learn about what's in your bag in the way of irons. Iron lofts have been changing constantly, so wedge gapping changes constantly. The old 52, 56, 60, which was kind of the standard wedge makeup 35 years ago, was when P clubs, as I call them, were 48 degrees. Well, now I'm seeing P clubs at 42, 44, 43 degrees. It makes you need to rethink your entire gapping at the short end of your set. And so what Wedge Fit is designed to do is to take you through a Q&A session so we can learn what's in your bag. What are your trajectories like? What are your misses like? What are your best shots like? Where's the strengths and the weaknesses of your scoring game? So, and what kind of shafts are in your irons? So we can recommend to you, whether it's Edison or somebody else, but, here's the gapping that's probably going to work for you. Here's the shafts you ought to have in your wedges. Here's the specifications for, lie angle and length and this kind of thing. My biggest thing is your wedges have to blend seamlessly, as I call it, to your irons. If you have a 42-degree P club and you're still playing a 52, 56, 60, you got a 10-degree gap in there that you don't have any golf clubs. And with iron technologies making these clubs go further and further, it doesn't matter what's in your hand. Do you have a 110-yard shot? Do you have a 90-yard shot? Do you have a 130-yard shot? And, as I get older, that 130-yard shot, may be moving to an 8-iron from a 9-iron. But that's okay.
Right.
But I still got to have a 130-yard shot in my bag because I'm going to be there. And I see so many golfers that they have upgraded their irons, so now their P club is a 135-yard club, but their gap wedge is still a 105-yard club. So they have a massive gap right in prime money range, I call it. I mean, when you're inside, 125, 130, 110, depending on your strength profile, that's when it's time to score. And so you got to have the right wedges in your bag to give you 10 to 12 degree, 13 degree gapping so that you can be precise when you're in that prime scoring range. And, nobody cares if you hit a 9-iron or a 7-iron from 130. Did it go close to the hole? Because that's all that really counts. Nobody's counting, you hit a 7-iron 3 feet from the hole, so, that's better than hitting a 9-iron 3 feet from the hole. No, it's not. It's 3 feet from the hole. Did you make that putt? So it's all about scoring and getting your set built for your strength profile, and that is what Wedge Fit is designed to take you through. And then our team will interact with you after you take Wedge Fit. We'd love to talk to people. I mean, we physically talk to almost 40% of our customers. The others, will end up buying online, and they feel like they know what they want. But we love talking to our customers because we can help guide them to what's right.
Yeah, and that's important because a lot of people don't know, as you pointed out, a lot of people don't know, or they get that gap because, as you said, they've upgraded the rest of their irons, and then they've sort of neglected, that end, the short end, if you will, of their clubs, and now they've got a 10-yard gap. And, regardless of what age you are, when you start getting that big of a gap in your irons, then it's a lot of guesswork when you get out in the golf course. Like you said, you get faced with a 130-yard shot and you don't have the right club in the bag. And so then you start making, physical adjustments. You start altering your swing, or you start making adjustments. And, Nicklaus famously said in Golf My Way, and I mentioned this earlier tonight in the show with Clint, and, he famously said that, the only thing I do when I'm out playing is I change the club. I don't change my golf swing. Now, obviously, for the shorter shots, it's obviously an abbreviated swing. But he said whether I'm swinging my driver or whether I'm swinging my 7-iron or what have you, it's the same golf swing. So I have to make sure I have the right club in my hand. And if you've got huge gaps throughout your set, especially with your wedges, then you have difficult time scoring. And that's really what it's about. And when you add in the factor, as you pointed out earlier, with the golf courses being more challenging and the especially the greens and around the greens, that becomes even more critical because you need to get closer to that hole to ensure likelihood of success. Because if you're 30 feet away and you've got a slippery slope and you're hitting 12 on the stimp meter, you've got some tricky putts ahead of you, and that's where a lot of people lose their strokes, is in that end. So we get them hooked up with WedgeFit on EdisonWedges.com. They go through the process. There's obviously some communication that goes back, and really you're doing a much deeper dive when you're fitting them with these wedges. And I like the fact that you have a money-back risk-free guarantee. So if somebody's not 100% happy, they have the option to send it back. And I went through the process after our last show, and obviously got a set of wedges sent out. And I got to say, quite honestly, I love them. And you guys did a great job. You hit the numbers right on where they needed to be for me. And so it's well worth the process. So any final thoughts on that before we wrap up?
We're a small company. We're challenging conventional wisdom. Our wedges don't look like anybody else's wedges because I didn't want them to work like everybody else's wedges. And one of the things that I remind people of is every great development in golf equipment has always required us to accept a different look. I mean, the peak, the monstrosity compared to the beautiful bullseyes and 8802s, which were a very different look than the long irons we had played. The Big Bertha, the Great Big Bertha, the big drivers, the cavity back irons didn't look like those gorgeous blades that were hard to hit. And in our industry, in golf, as a team, when we make a quantum leap, it's going to come in a different looking package. That's just, the golf ball has always looked pretty much from the outside, even though it's very different on the inside. But in the golf club world, different performance is going to come in a different looking package. And we in the industry, there's a lot of bright people in here just that every day trying to figure out how to make a 7-iron work better, how to make a driver work better, how to make a 3-wood work better, how to make a putter work better. But it's going to require you to accept it. Better is going to look different. Let's just look at that. It's going to look different than what you used to see, And, you can say, well, I think a 3-iron is prettier than the 3 hybrid. Well, that's fine, but it doesn't work near as good. So,
right.
Better always looks.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And just to let the folks know, of course, your mantra is the Edison wedges are custom built to order for each customer. You put them together and ship them from your operations center in Rockport, Texas. So great facility there. And if you're interested in learning more, again, visit EdisonWedges.com as the website. And if you're in the market and you think you need to update those wedges in your bag, go through WedgeFit. It's well worth it, and you're going to learn a lot as well, and you're going to get a better understanding. And a lot of people, be surprised, don't know their game. And this is going to help them understand it a little bit better. It's going to help you guys understand their game, and you're going to be able to put some great wedges together for them so that when they get out there in the golf course, they're going to have a much better time and a lot more fun. And that's really what this game is all about. But Terry, I want to thank you for coming back, and I really enjoy our conversations. I loved having you on the first time, and I was excited to have you back this time. And there's so many things, so many different areas that we could cover. So I'm going to have to maybe have you come back again in the new year, and we'll talk some more. But you do a fantastic job. The products, the wedges are just really fantastic, top-notch, and you do a great job, and your team does as well. So kudos to all of them as well as yourself. And thank you very much for joining me and my audience this evening on Golf Talk Live. It's been a pleasure.
Well, hey, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, and I'd love to come back on. We can talk about short game techniques, swing techniques. I've made a study of this part of the game for 40 years, and, I share what I know with people because, there's nothing better at golf.
I couldn't agree more. Terry, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your week and great weekend. And as we get ready to head into a new month, October, fall season, still lots of great golf to be played. So again, go to edisonwedges.com is the website, and go through the wedge fit process, and I guarantee you won't be disappointed. But Terry, again, thank you very much, and have a great rest of your evening and a great weekend.
Thank you, and the same back to you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye. All right, that was Terry Koehler, the Chairman and Director of Innovation at Edison Golf, and again, based out of Rockport, Texas, is where they assemble the clubs and ship them out through their operations center, and edisonwedges.com is their website. Definitely go and check it out. A lot of great information there, and as Terry mentioned, he puts together a blog as well with some useful information, so definitely want to check it out. Again, special thanks to my good friend and buddy Clint Wright for joining me earlier on the Coach's Corner panel. Always a lot of fun, Clint. Always have some great discussions with you, and glad you're able to join me on these Thursday evening Coach's Corner panels every month. So that, and also, again, a special thanks to tonight's guest, Terry Koehler from Edison Golf. On that note, God bless everybody. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week right here on Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.